I have a confession to make. I am never going to win Golden Daemon. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another Glacial Geek video. I'm Phil, the Glacial Geek, and today I want to talk about something that I don't think gets talked about, honestly, enough out there, and it's that painting can be too much sometimes. And a lot of people, when they paint, when they make their armies, when they do whatever they're doing, they're trying to get them ready to put onto the tabletop to go play, either for a tournament where they have a painting requirement, or just to play with their friends because it looks cool. And honestly, playing with a fully painted army and having fully painted armies on the table does look cool, and it makes for a very fun activity to play with, and it really enhances the game no matter if you're playing like top tier tournament style or if you're just doing fun narrative things. Having fully painted armies enhances it a lot. And in my experience, the difference between a poorly painted army and a superly well painted army is not that great a difference when you're playing the game and when they're on the table. And at the end of the day, what most of us, 99.9% of us, I'm sure, are trying to achieve is something that looks cool on the table. That's not just bare plastic, that we can play with and have a little bit more of an immersion with it, as opposed to just a bunch of the gray horde streaming across the tabletop. So, I have 5 secrets that will keep you from winning the Golden Daemon, but will also get you to have an army on the table. So rule number 1 to not winning Golden Daemon is don't worry about highlights. You look at the work on the box art, you see all of these videos online, and you see all of these display models that people put out in these contest winnings, and they have some intricate use of light with their painting. So they'll have object source lighting, they'll have edge highlighting, they'll have dramatic ways of highlighting, blending, all these different things to make a cool look with the paint to get a model to look dimensional. Honestly, it's to make it look dimensional in a photo. Because at the end of the day, most of our models, when we're playing with them, or even when we're just looking at them, are not going to be with flat light. They're going to be with dimensional light. Either the light coming from on top of the table in the game store, or in your basement, or wherever, or just light coming through a window. There will always be a direction for that light, a directional light. And that light is innately going to give you dimension on your models when you're looking at it. Because there is a direction that the light's coming with, and the way it works with shadows and just the way all the light is there, you will have a dimension to the model when you are looking at it. And if you are trying to put together a huge army to put down on the table, worrying about edge highlighting every single bit of armor on your Space Marine is not going to do as much for your army to get it on the table as just using the right materials. That brings us to rule number 2. Which is don't worry about complicated processes when painting models for an army. Instead of using non-metallic metal processes that can take a ton of work and effort and don't look right unless you're looking at the model from a specific direction, just use true metallics. Because they will again use the same reasoning that the highlights work. It will use the light that is innately there when you are looking at it to give you the sense of metallics, to give you a sense of metal using actual flecks of reflective material within the paint itself. Also, don't worry about doing things like using the super matte paints that are really expensive out there. Use cheaper ones. Use Citadel paints. Use Army Painter paints that have a satin finish, which will enhance the ability of that model to have that directional lighting onto it, and it will not be as difficult to make a good looking model. Matte paints only look good if you put a lot of effort into the processes that you are painting with them, because you are not going to get any help from the materials itself to make an interesting, enhanced looking model. You are not going to get dimensional lighting. It will be flat, and it will look flat unless you paint in dimension. And when you are making an army, the point is to get an army painted and put out on the table that looks good, but doesn't take 1,000 years to do. So don't bother with the high processes, don't bother with the high expensive paints. Use the cheaper model paints that are out there to paint your models, and they will help you make a better looking model with less effort than if you use the more expensive paints and the more expensive processes to try to paint the same models. Rule number 3 on how not to win the Golden Daemon. Complicated bases do not work in large armies. I know a lot of people like to show off really cool looking bases, and they like to add different bits and different things onto these bases to make it look like they're within the realm that they are coming from. That really only works for display models because they don't require you to be able to maneuver the models. They don't require them to look cohesive with other models. When you're painting up an entire huge force, keep your basing simple. Use a texture paste, use sand, use maybe little bits of rocks. Whatever it is, just keep it simple so that you can keep it uniform across the whole army so that it all looks cohesive when you finish painting it. And also that they don't get in the way of the actual model when you are playing with it on the tabletop. Also, complicated bases very often detract from the model themselves. So if you're going to make a cool looking model, you don't want a complicated base distracting away from the viewer from the model itself. So take that extra time that you would have used in the bases and just put a little extra effort into painting your models, and you will be far better off than using complicated bases in your army. Rule number 4 on how not to win a Golden Daemon, and it is don't get bogged down in the details. The extra details that people put into these cool models that you see on Instagram or you see in painting tutorials online, they look rad, but they are good for just looking at, and they will not help you get a fully painted army onto the table. If you are painting every single button on every single model that you are painting there, you will take 1,000 years to get your whole army out onto the table. And that is not what we are trying to do with not winning a Golden Daemon. We are trying to get a fully painted force out onto the tabletop. So if you take the time to paint every single detail, you will get either burnt out or you just will never finish painting that entire army. If instead you focus on the big areas that the eyes are drawn to, focus on getting some kind of dimension to the face, come up with a cool looking color scheme, put in some other pops of color, maybe they're guns you put a different color, something like that, adding in little pops of metallics, maybe some pouches. Put some effort into the details so it doesn't just look like you just rattle canned one color onto a model, but don't get bogged down in every single detail. Every single rivet does not need to be painted on a model for it to look good on the table. So go out there and take your time painting 1,000 models instead of just the same amount of time on one single model because of all the details you get lost there. You don't have to make a photorealistic display on their auspex to make it look good. It just needs to be there, and use some washes to work with you. Which brings us to rule number 5 in how not to win the Golden Daemon. And that is that there is no such thing as cheating when it comes to painting. So, wash the entire model. Don't just take all the time in the world to just pin line every single recess on that model. Wash the whole thing. And yeah, it will deaden it down a little bit, but not enough that you're really going to notice it. And if you want, you can go back in there and put in some more of the base coat if you want to brighten it up. But just wash the whole thing. Don't take the time to just put in all of the lines with a bunch of pin washes. Take the time to just paint more models as opposed to taking the time on every single individual model. Dry brushing brings out a lot of dimension if you do want to add a little bit of extra bit to your stuff. The lighting will give you dimension on your highlight, but if you just want to put a little dry brush to pop things, go for it. It doesn't matter if it looks a little bit dusty. That's not what we're going for. We're not looking to get a top score in our painting. We're looking to make a cool looking model that is on the table that we can enjoy while we are playing. And use tools that will work to your advantage. Speed paints, contrast paints, any of those. They will work to give you a fast result, especially on things like skin and bubbly things on like rotting flesh, on cloaks and cloth. All of these things with dimension work. Bark. All of this looks great with the speed paints and contrast paints because they're just give you all of that dimension with the physicality of the model. So just let those paints do what they're going to do. You're not going to win Golden Daemon by painting an entire model in speed paints, but you will have a cool looking model that's part of a huge army that you were able to paint out there on the table on your Saturday afternoon when you're playing with your friends. So know that there is no such thing as cheating. Use those tools. Use those speed paints. Use that dry brushing. Use that rattle can primer with a color in it so you don't have to worry about putting down a base coat. Don't bother with painting a black primed model black again because what if you have to go back and fix something? You can, And there's never going to be so much of a difference between a primer black and your paint black that is going to make that big of a difference that you're going to really notice it. I do it all the time. When I use the different, rattle cans, when I've used different paints, when I go back and it's like after I've washed it and I need to go clean up a little spot, I'll use it and it'll look fine. There may be a little spot if you're going over it with a microscope, but that's only going to come into effect if you are trying to win a Golden Daemon, not if you're trying to paint an entire army. 3 feet away on the tabletop, you'll never notice those little bits and pieces that you clean up. So those are my top 5 tips on how not to win a Golden Daemon, but get an entire army onto your table there. So, go out there, take care of your gray hordes, and don't get discouraged by the amazing paint jobs that people are doing out there. Absolutely appreciate the skill and amazingness that they do out there, but don't be bogged down by their skill and keep you from doing what you want to do. It's like watching an NBA game and then deciding that you don't want to go and shoot hoops with your friends because you'll never be as good as LeBron James. It's like, no duh. That's what he does. But you don't have to be LeBron James to enjoy playing basketball. You can miss every single shot you did if you just had fun with your friend in the backyard on a Saturday afternoon. It's the same thing with painting your army. It may never win an award. It may never give you the fake Instagram notoriety of having an incredibly painted army or incredibly painted model that has every single lifelike detail put into it. But it will get an entire painted army out there on the table for you because you're not getting bogged down in these things that are unnecessary to have a fully painted army and that are only necessary if what you are gunning and what you are trying to do is have an award-winning model. Now, with this in mind, you can take your time and do all of those extra things. Use the different tools and different methods. Take your time on complicated bases for a display model if you want to paint that, to give yourself a little bit of a centerpiece if you want in your army that looks a bit different than everything else. If you want to just have a display model up on your shelf that you want to take the time and effort to put into it. But if you are looking to get a fully painted army, do not get locked down and bogged down by all of these things that are only good if you are trying to win awards. And honestly, usually only good if you are trying to paint literally one model. So go out there, take care of your gray plastic, and don't get sucked into this notion that every single model that you paint has to be a masterpiece. And every single model that you paint has to be towards some award-winning piece that you're trying to make. Put in the effort to get a fully painted army. But only put in the effort that you need to make it look cool for you and your friends. Because at the end of the day, no one's going to judge your painting that matters. Because at the end of the day, the only person that matters is you. If the guy in the shop comments about the fact that you don't have highlights on all of your models, then he can go paint highlights on his own models. You don't have to worry about it. And anyone who says otherwise is honestly lying to you. Because these are your models. Do them how you want to. If you want to have red ultramarines, have red ultramarines. Because you like the color red, but you like the rules for ultramarines. Sounds good. Do it. And paint it however you want. If you just want to, take the Arm Painter's rattle can red, paint your army with that, wash it all, and put in a couple of little details, you're good to go. You have a cool looking army. You have cool looking models. So don't get bogged down in the details. Don't get discouraged by other people who are trying to create award-winning masterpieces, and accept that what you want isn't professional quality painting. You want an army that's painted that looks great on the table. So go out there. Don't win an award, but have a fully painted army. And that's how you don't win a Golden Daemon. So let me know down below if you have any other tips that you like to share about how not to win a Golden Daemon, but how to get an army out on the table for you, and what has worked for you over the years, and what hasn't worked for you over the years, so that we can help each other become better hobbyists and enjoy what we do together more and more. So, I hope you guys have all enjoyed this. I certainly have. I have been Phil, the Glacial Geek, as always. And until next time, stay safe and have fun.